Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. We'll get started momentarily. As you join our room, please feel free to add in the chat where you're calling in from. We'd love to know a little bit more about our audience today. Oh, Colette's on the call. Thanks for joining us, Colette. Awesome. Great. Thank you all for being with us. Welcome to NMWA xChange, a spinoff of the award-winning pandemic live stream series BMA NMWA. I'm Addie Gayoso, NMWA's senior educator. And hello, viewers. Thank you for being with us today. Today's episode of NMWA xChange is cart captioned, thanks to Joyful Signing and to Candace Martin for making this possible. To see live captions, you can click on the CC button in Zoom. And if you don't see the CC button, click on the More button. You should be able to find it there. Please feel free to add your questions in the chat or in the Q&A, and we will do our best to address all of those today. Today is bittersweet as we welcome you to our final episode of NMWA xChange on what is the program's second anniversary. It's hard to believe that since 2021, September of 2021, NMWA hosts have been joined by special guests to center women creatives. We've considered topics relevant to our world and offered insight into collaborations NMWA has been fostering while the building has been closed for our major renovation. During this time of change, we have been privileged to exchange ideas with our guests and our viewers. Given that this is our final episode, I just wanted to express special thanks to all of our guests today and past, as well as our viewers, as well as to NMWA colleagues who have supported this series, including Elizabeth Ajunwa, Deborah Gaston, Ashley Harris, Laura Huffman, Hannah Shambroom, and Oreen Zara. And I wanted to thank also my thought partner in this project and my regular co-host, NMWA's senior educator, Jenny Trainer. Thanks, Jenny, and hello.
You gave me a new job, senior educator.
Oh, senior curator. No, my gosh, you have my job now. We can both do it. It's great. Thanks for joining, Jenny.
Senior geriatric curator. Yes, that is me. Hi, Addie. Hi, everyone. I'm happy, sad today that this is our last episode. It's been really a tremendous amount of fun and really a privilege to be able to bring people together in this way and kind of fulfill our mission in this virtual realm. And, you know, never say never. We might come back in some way in the future, but right now we are all definitely focused on the reopening of our physical museum in about 5 weeks or so. So we spoke on our last episode to Lenora Williams, who curated the special exhibition Holding Ground that will be on view on in our new 4th floor galleries when the museum reopens on October 21st. And along with Lenora, we were joined by 2 of the artists featured in the exhibition, Adjoa Burrows and also Colette Fu, who is one of the artists we'll be speaking about today as well. So giving Colette lots of love, as she deserves, on this program. So, like I said, we're getting ready for this grand reopening, and we have a couple of, I don't want to say surprises, but a couple of new things in store for our visitors. And one of those things is a series of short films that is going to be on view when we reopen. It's going to be in the Long Gallery, which is that kind of nice intimate gallery right on the 1st floor off of the Great Hall. And we've been working with the firm Art Processors to design a kind of intimate, immersive viewing experiences for these films. Each of these films, there are 8 of them on different contemporary artists in our collection, and they're about 3 minutes each. Each one focuses on an artist, and they'll be screened 4 at a time. So when we reopen, 4 of them will be on view, and then partway through that first opening year, we will put up another 4. They will also be available online, but of course, we hope that if you are able, you come to the museum to see them in person. So here with us today are the members of the production team from Smartypants, who are going to talk to us about the process of producing these films with us and what each of their roles were in that process. And very briefly, I just want to introduce all of them. We have, maybe if you just, as I say your name, give a little wave, even though your name is written right there. See, we have directors Marette Mueller, Anais Blondet, and Suzanne Hillinger. And we have with us producers Chelsea Nolan-McClintock and Kaya Quinn. So before I turn it over to you, I want to preemptively answer a question that I know that we're going to be asked. How did we decide, out of all the artists represented in our collection, how did we decide on these 8 artists? And the answer to that is that it was really a collaborative effort between all of the staff at NMWA. Everyone got to weigh in with their input, and we had a big Excel sheet that everyone could put names in, they could vote for people, and we basically just kind of tallied the results from that. So this is a reflection of I think the collaborative nature of the work that we do, but also a reflection of, you know, the artists that means so much to so many of us who work at the National Museum of Women in the Arts. So with that, I would like to ask Chelsea if you could tell us a little bit about the beginning of this whole process from your perspective, from your end.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jenny, and hi, everyone. So this was a project that started even before my time, but we started having conversations in early January of 2022, just speaking with NMWA about the reopening of the museum and what they were hoping to do with this project. And then, as Jenny mentioned, started reaching out to the artists after that time. And once you reached out to the artists and we had our list and confirmed their participation, we reached out to schedule pre-interviews. And once we had those pre-interviews, that was really when we were able to dig in and start planning the story around each artist and how we would cover them and what that meant, where we would travel to, what sort of filming we would do. And that's a process that Marette can speak to in a little bit.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm trying to advance the screen and I'm having technical difficulties. I just wanted to give people a little sneak peek as to what who the artists are. I should have mentioned them out loud. So I mentioned there are 2 groups. So the first group that will be profiled, screened at the museum, the Guerrilla Girls, Delita Martin, Rania Matar, and Alison Saar. And then the second group is Ambreen Butt, Sonya Clark, Colette Fu, and Graciela Iturbide. And just to give you a little sneak peek. Oh, what happened to that? Oh, my screen is covering it. That's it. On the right, you see a digital rendering of what this space is going to look like.
Thanks, Jenny. I think it would be fun to hear a little bit more from the producers of the series, just from Kaya and from Chelsea. I'm wondering what were, from your perspectives, the most challenging and rewarding aspects of producing this project? So we can start with Kaya, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I would say for me, I mean, kind of what being a producer is figuring out the logistics of bringing a story to life. And I think what was really great about this project is through the pre-interviews, we were able to tell what stories were important to us. And it was very much like a fun jigsaw puzzle to figure out between all of the schedules and all of the timing and everything we need to do, how to bring the right team together to do this. And I know we wanted to be very intentional with the team we brought to cover this story. So the hardest part ended up being the most rewarding part, because by going through kind of all of those like little, I don't want to call them challenges because it just comes with production, but finding out how to make all of it work made it all come together in a very genuine way. Like on the ground, the people who were there were the best people to be there, and it was some of the most fun shooting I've seen come to life, and the thought that went into it was really incredible from the directors.
That's awesome. Okay, were you at all of the locations for the filming? Were you on the ground for everything?
Not for everything. I was there for our Texas shoots with Delita and Ambreen, and then I was also there for our New York shoot as well.
Nice.
But for travel shoots, it's obviously fast and furious. So we get on the ground and we do a lot with what time we have. And again, super can't say how proud I am of the team of just not only did we capture it, but we made it look beautiful. Awesome.
Thank you. And yeah, we'll mention some other folks on the Smartypants team, and there are too many to name in our brief time together, but this was really a team effort. There are 5 of you with us and many more behind the scenes who are instrumental in making these pieces come to life. Chelsea, how about for you? What were sort of the biggest challenges and rewards of this project?
One of the biggest challenges in production is always just time. As Kaya said, it's just a big puzzle finding out who is available when, where we can access certain places, what we can accomplish in our given time and scope, and how all of that kind of comes together in the bigger picture. But as also Kaya said, that is what makes it rewarding. The biggest reward is always seeing it come together in the end. These films are amazing and we can't wait for everyone to see them. The artists themselves were incredibly generous with their time and their space and their spirit. And I think it really translates to screen. And so we're really proud of these.
Yeah, and we should also note that Kaya makes a cameo in one of the films. So you'll just have to wait and see which one that is. So I'd like to talk about each of the films a little bit. I know we don't have a ton of time, but because they were all so, they're also individual, the films, as the artists, of course, themselves are. So let's start with, we'll just go in alphabetical order. We'll start with Ambreen Butt, and this is a work that is in our collection. Those of you that have been to the museum might be familiar with it. And Ambreen is trained in traditional Indian and Persian miniature painting. She's originally from Pakistan, and she reimagines the genre, this traditional painting genre, to feature contemporary female protagonists and political subject matter. And her work process is very, very labor intensive. There's a lot of different techniques that she's using. You can't really see it on this image, but it's actually stitched. She stitched together layers of paper and mylar. So let's talk a little bit about Ambreen's shoot. And I think Marette was the director of that. So Marette, can you tell us a little bit about what we're looking at in these images?
Yeah, so Chelsea mentioned the pre-interview process a little bit, and I can say, for each of the artists, we went in with really sort of big open-ended questions, just trying to get a sense of kind of their process and what themes were most important to them in their work, and really how to represent not just their work, but also kind of how they see the world. And for Ambreen, the theme that she kept kind of coming back to was this one of time and labor. And, as you mentioned, her work is so detailed and so painstaking that we really wanted to make sure that came across in her, not just in the words that she spoke in the piece, but also visually how we filmed it. So we filmed with her, working throughout the day, but then also at night. And I think kind of seeing the daytime, the shift between night and day really helped to show the passage of time and how, focused she is throughout all of it. And the photo here is we filmed with her family for a few scenes because she spoke a lot about kind of the hidden, unseen labor of women and mothers in particular. And so we wanted to make sure that was also represented in the piece.
Thank you, Marette. And we should mention too that Marette, you did all of the pre-interviews before we did the shooting, correct? So that was sort of a step in your process as well. Awesome. Should we take a look at the next artist? Our next artist is Sonya Clark, and they're all our favorites, but we recently had a major exhibition of Sonya Clark's work before we closed for renovation. This piece called Curls is one of several in our collection that will be on view in Sky's the Limit, which will be a special exhibition when the museum reopens. And for those of you unfamiliar, Sonya Clark is actually a Washington-born artist. She identifies as a textile artist, but she really utilizes a lot of different types of materials to create her works that address issues of history, Blackness, and discuss and identify racial tension and stereotypes. This particular work is made of dozens of Black plastic combs, and as I said, it's one of many examples of her work in our collection. Suzanne, I know you directed this particular piece. Can you tell us a bit more about your conversation with Sonya?
Yeah, so Sonya came down to New York for our interview with her. So, we didn't have the privileges of sort of being in her studio and her space with all of her work. So you'll see in the piece that we sort of show a lot of her work in exhibit, but it allowed us to really focus in on her interview. And, Sonya is someone she's a textile artist, but she identifies with the word text and really breaks down the etymology of words and meaning and materials in this really detailed, kind of almost like anthropological way. So the conversation is so rich because she's not just thinking about, what is the best answer to give about my work, but sort of like, what is the question and how are we engaging in a conversation about art? And how does the conversation about a piece of work give more meaning back to the work? I mean, there's so many layers of the way that she sees art and sees her work and sees material that is just like endlessly inspiring. Really hard to get it down to a 3-minute piece because she is such a brilliant thinker. And so, we had a really compelling conversation about sort of textile as language, everyday materials like these combs that you see in the exhibit. She uses a lot of hair. She uses a lot of everyday materials that aren't typically seen as like high art. But Sonya also says, people think, well, you're not an artist if you're not a painter, but we all have, paint on our walls. Paint is also an everyday material. So she kind of makes you see the world and the objects that we see every day in a totally different way. And she views them with a lot of meaning and history. I think she is just sort of an incredible thinker. I always think about when the museum opens, being able to walk around with Sonya in the way that she sees art must be so inspiring. So maybe once it's open, if we get lucky enough to be there on a day Sonya's there, and what a gift.
Yeah, I think a good word to describe Sonya, like as an artist, as a person, is mind-blowing. So many things she says are just mind-blowing in their just like you said, Suzanne, the way that she thinks about things and breaks it down, and then kind of translates that into these amazing visual philosophies, for lack of a better word. Really, really looking forward to seeing her work on view when we reopen. Let's talk about Colette Fu, who I mentioned was our guest on our last episode. She's also a subject of one of the films. And Colette, if you're familiar with her from her works in art collection, works in sculptural pop-up books that are these wonderfully, just the presence that they exude in their physical space is really amazing. They're really intricate, they're really detailed. And I'm showing you one that she has made particularly for us for our reopening. And you might recognize the image there. It is actually the bouquet of flowers from the 17th century Flemish artist Clara Peters in our collection. So this really kind of wonderful homage to our collection. And Moret, I think you also directed Colette Fu.
Did, yes.
And what were kind of some of the standouts of that?
Yeah, so many. I know Colette is here as well. So hi, Colette. But I feel like for one of the themes that really came through in our conversations with Colette were, kind of just this sense of magic and awe. And I felt such a sense of awe around Colette's craft and the fact that she was actually constructing these highly complex, really detailed paper sculptures. And then also just the kind of sense of surprise and delight and magic and awe that comes from, the experience of seeing this flat object open. And that's something that we really wanted to represent visually in the film. And one of the exciting things about being able to show Colette's work in moving image and not just still images was the opportunity to actually open the pieces. And so there's kind of a sequence in the film of all of her books opening, and that's one of my favorite sequences.
There's also a really awesome sequence at the end of Colette rollerblading through the streets of Philadelphia, which is one of my favorite things out of all of the films.
Heck yes, that was an amazing moment.
I'm so glad that you mentioned the importance of video with Colette's work, because often when we display her works at the museum, they're behind glass or in a case and they're open. So there's that sort of sense of magic and awe of opening a pop-up book, which I really, that resonates with me, because some of my favorite books as a child were pop-up books. There's sort of this like interactivity to them, this sort of amazement that so this paper engineering can create this sort of magical three-dimensional world. But our visitors only see sort of the final moment of that, with it sort of blossoming in front of them, but they don't get to see the experience of it actually opening up. So I'm excited to see the video. And I have to say, you had a special guest puppy during your shoe, right? Is that Nori?
Nori, yes, Nori was delightful. Nori always wanted to be where the action was and was always falling asleep right where the action was. So yeah, Nori was really sweet. And I will say too that like one of the amazing things about Colette's work is how you know, she's kind of like deconstructing these categories of like what is fine art and what is craft, and like the way that she's inviting people to really interact and touch her work was really cool as well.
Yeah, I also have to say, Colette's an amazing photographer, and she often uses her own photographs in her works as well. So again, sort of these blurring these lines of what we perceive as traditional art and craft is a really interesting and important part of her body of work. And also it's exciting to be able to, that she allows us in a way to sort of experience her work tactily when many artists do not. Our next artist, so going from one fuzzy creature from Nori to perhaps other fuzzy creatures, our next artist is actually a collective, the Guerrilla Girls. They were established in 1985 in New York. And for those of you who don't know about their work, they're an anonymous collective of artist activists who promote gender and racial equality in the art world. They create billboards and other ephemera, print ephemera, sort of that call museums and art publications and galleries to task for not showing works by women, by artists of color at an equal rate as white men. So I'm really excited to hear a little bit more. And I should mention too, all of the works we're showing in these sort of artist profile slides, these works will be on view when the museum reopens as well. So I know, Marette, you also, you directed the Guerrilla Girls. I'm curious how your time was with them, what surprised you about your experience with them?
Yeah, we had so much fun with them. I was really kind of taken by their friendship, actually, and kind of like remembering that, you know, they've been best friends for like I think 40 or 50 years, and that was just really fun to like see the banter that was happening during our interview, and also, you know, just around the day of shooting. You can tell that they really have like a deep friendship and respect for each other, and also like a really wicked sense of humor. And we did see them take their masks off, but we'll never tell who they are. And yeah, it was just a really fun day. We kind of ran around all over different neighborhoods in New York City and got some kind of guerrilla art action as well.
And I think we should say that they're more than just the two of them. Nobody really knows, I don't think, the exact number, and they all take on names of I think deceased. I don't think they ever take on a living name of women artists from the past. And so Marette sat down with Frida Kahlo and Katie Kollwitz, and that's who appear in the film. So, but yeah, really, really fun, really, really great film. It's so different from many of the others in a lot of ways, and kind of the tone and the pace of it, which is great. I hope no one asked me what my favorite film is, because I would never be able to decide. But one of the ones that almost made me cry when I saw it for the first time in Rough Cut was the Graciela Iturbide film, because she is so that she just has this sense of gravitas about her, and she's so, like, her presence just came through that film. Here I'm showing you a photograph that is in our collection. For those of you who don't know Graciela Iturbide, is a Mexican photographer, and we had a monographic exhibition on her a few years ago. And it was really just amazing to be able to work with her on that. Anais, you were in Mexico City with Graciela and directed her film, and I have to say, seeing the behind the scenes shots is like a lot of fun.
That's not me behind the camera, by the way. That's our amazing DP, Alyssa. I'm in the green shirt in the big group shot, which we took at the very end of the shoot to celebrate an amazing day. But yeah, I feel really, really fortunate to have been entrusted with the sacred task of directing Graciela's film because, well, first of all, we got to go to Mexico. It was our only international shoot. But second, because, I mean, she's an icon. I'm originally from Peru, and in all of Latin America, she's considered like really one of the living greats. And when I told my mom that I was going to interview Graciela, she like completely flipped out. I was already starstruck, but meeting her was really just like a highlight of this entire series. And her interview was like really exceptionally moving. I had to, like you, Jenny, like holding back tears the entire time. I really had to hold in my own emotions to let her tell her stories because she was that vulnerable and that generous. We shot part of the film in her studio, which was directly across from her home, both designed by her son, Mauricio Rocha. Just like architecturally, the most incredible spaces you could possibly imagine. And yeah, we had an amazing local crew, all, you know, just also equally starstruck to be in Graciela's presence. And it was just such a joyous, incredible day. At the end, she surprised us by bringing out a bottle of her favorite tequila, tequileño, and she gifted me one personally that I still have in my house. No one's allowed to touch it. It's like it should be encased in like museum glass. But yeah, we all had a drink at the end and celebrated. And then, you know, I worked with one of our editors, Charlotte Savage, on the edit, but because the interview was in Spanish, I had to cut down the interview to a really tight 3 minutes. And I also want to give a shout out to our composer. I specifically chose music by a composer based in New York called Sarah Bernstein because I was like, I need this to be classical. I did ask Graciela what kind of music she listened to at home or in the studio when she was reviewing her contact sheets, and she said classical, only classical. So I found this absolutely breathtakingly beautiful piece by Sarah. I laid it down over Graciela's interview, and I got goosebumps. So passed that over to Charlotte, and she worked her magic. And I get choked up every time I watch the film. Not to like toot my own horn, but it's just Graciela. She's absolutely an exceptional artist and human being, and I really actually really look up to her.
It's so gorgeous. I mean, the way that you use the architecture too, and the way that it's used throughout the film is really just magical, I think. And the music for all of these, I think that we should say, you guys at Smartypants really made a concerted effort, right, to use music from women composers, which I think just adds a really nice layer. And Anais, is it true that you also contributed some music to this series?
Yes, I didn't compose it specifically for the piece, but Marette surprised me because she said that they were having trouble finding music for Guerrilla Girls. And she's like, well, she also worked with Charlotte, the same editor that cut Graciela's piece. And Charlotte texted me and she was like, I just went to your website and I pulled a bunch of music. This is like from bands I had like 10 years ago. And I was like, sure, use it. And I'm really glad they did. I was so honored. I mean, to like, you know, work with the Guerrilla Girls, even if indirectly, was an honor.
So well with that film. It works so well. It's amazing. Yeah.
I'm just so, I'm in awe of just first of all jealous that you got to spend all this time with these amazing artists, but I'm just so in awe of the creative work that you all have done and sort of the team you put together. Our next artist I wanted to show, it seems like, I know Anais, you mentioned in our initial conversation how hard it was to cut down Graciela's conversation with you, because there's so much richness and sort of vulnerability in what she shared. And I wanted to talk a little bit about Delita Martin next and hear from Kaya, because I think she had a sort of similar experience with this artist. So Delita Martin, for those who may not be knowledgeable about her work, Delita Martin creates these really beautiful, large scale, she calls prints, but she uses a variety of media to create them. She prints, she draws, she sews on them. They're sort of layers of collage, as well as paint. And her goal is to claim space for her subjects, creating a powerful presence that simultaneously highlights the historical absence of Black bodies in Western art and reinserts them. And this is a work in our collection which looks amazing in our galleries. It's just incredibly vibrant. And this actually is her husband, a portrait of her husband. She often creates portraits of women, but not always. And in this case, this is her husband, and we're fortunate to have this work in our collection. And I wanted to share some images behind the scenes of the shoot with Delita, as well as a still from a brief video that Smartypants showed as she was printing one of her pieces. But I wanted to ask Kaya. Kaya, you mentioned you were really taken by Delita Martin in particular in all of the shoots that you attended. I was hoping you would tell us a little bit more about what drew you to her.
Yeah, I think Delita was an amazing artist to work with. Coming in, I wasn't as aware of her work before we started this project, and I think by the end of it, she became one of my favorite artists. It was really incredible to see her studio, first of all, and seeing how her studio is just in the backyard of her home, and seeing how it basically felt like different sections and different rooms that contributed to the different layers of her work, which I feel like was also reflected in just seeing her family, her home, hearing her talk about like her son, having her husband out in the yard, like growing vegetables. They had like such a beautiful, I feel like an inspirational home. And it was really kind of, even for me individually, like as a filmmaker and artist being there, seeing her exist and seeing her creations come to life and learning more about her process. And I think Marat and the DP we had on that project did an amazing job of really thinking thoughtfully about how do we activate each of these different areas to really put light on her work. And I say light, there's my favorite thing from the entire shoot was there was a moment with Delita where we had a perfect stream of sun, like a sun ray coming into the room, and it just lit everything up and felt so just it was just a very beautiful, like almost magical moment happening in life. And I think Delita's work kind of lends to that. It's so bright, it's so colorful, and it's so authentic and inspired from the different elements in her own life. And then you can see how that kind of manifests in her real world and the space she occupies in her home.
It's really cool. I'm thinking about how this idea of like the light coming in and hitting her, there's a sense in her work of like, there's this ethereal, she talks about this idea of sort of the spiritual and the spaces between, the liminal spaces that we occupy between sort of awareness and lack of awareness. And I think based on the space she occupies, you can imagine like how inspiring that might be. All right. Thanks so much, Kaya, for sharing. Marat, I'm curious, what image are we looking at on the far left? Was this a conversation that her family was having, or?
Yeah, on the far left, that was her cousin, her husband, Delita, and her sister are part of that conversation, and they were actually looking at old family photos. Delita is really, in part, really inspired by her grandmother's quilting, and so her sister and Delita both offered for us to film some of their grandmother's quilts, and then really open up their family albums, and so that we could represent this kind of sense of history and lineage that also really informs Delita's work.
I think another thing that comes through in this film is the scale of her work. For those of you who haven't seen it in person, a lot of Delita's work is enormous. I mean, you think about works on paper as being, these small little things, but hers are larger than life size. I mean, they really, really have a presence. Another artist we focused on was Rania Matar, who is in our collection, represented in our collection in part by this work here, that was part of, well, was it part of an exhibition? It was on view a few years ago. And then she was also part of a photography exhibition a few years prior to that. And we've developed this really lovely relationship with her. She is a Lebanese Palestinian American documentary, portrait, and fine art photographer. And she photographs the daily lives of girls and women, mostly in the US, also in the Middle East. And Suzanne, you mentioned relating to Matar, to Rania Matar in particular, as a subject and as an artist. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think with all of these pieces, I'm pretty sure the other directors and producers would agree, like it is incredibly inspirational to be around these women, watching them do their art or getting to talk about their process, because there's not a lot of opportunities as female artists or as an artist in general to be able to talk to someone who's further along in their career, or they've had achievements, to be like, you know, like what can I learn from you, or what has your journey been, and feel like there's a real kinship there. That is just like really it feels innate, and I immediately felt that connection with Rania, and she is so emotional and sort of vulnerable and curious about people. And yeah, she's a documentarian as well. So am I. And I feel like her curiosity to understand people's stories and try to collaborate with them to encapsulate a piece of that story in a photograph is something that I do in a moving a video medium, but the process is quite similar. And I am very moved by sort of the level of like the relationship that she builds with each person that she photographs. She talks about it feeling like a mother-daughter or a sister, and feeling like she wants to make sure that the person she's photographing has agency and is really a collaborator with her in taking the photograph, in deciding, where they want to be photographed, what they want to say, is there a misconception about themselves? She photographs a lot of Muslim women in the Middle East, and a lot of her work is about challenging some misconceptions. And she delights in finding surprise in these women and being inspired by them. And there's a real dynamic relationship that happens between her and her subjects that I just think is so respectful and authentic, and I think really challenges the sort of male gaze that we see in other male photographers about sort of like objectifying women's bodies and things like that. And it's always sort of in the back of Rania's mind and challenging that gaze, and more so, yeah, really giving agency to the people that she's photographing. So, we talked a lot about that in her interview, and why that process means something to her. And then also we had the opportunity to go and document her doing some of her work, which she photographed Kaya for us, which was like so fun. And I will never forget the moment when we were having a pre-interview with her, and I was like, can we film, is there somebody in New York who you've been wanting to photograph? And she looks at Kaya dead in the eyes, and she's like, you. And it was just so exciting. I mean, Kaya, I'm sure you can talk a little bit about that feeling, but like, it was so exciting to then get to sort of see them work with each other. And, it was for the benefit of the piece. So we didn't necessarily get to go to all the places that, Rania and Kaya would go to if they were really having the time to work on something, specifically. But seeing how careful she is and nurturing she is, it really comes through in all of her work. And it's something that, yeah, I mean, I will take with me as I move on to my own projects. Just sort of the care that she treats her subjects is very inspiring.
Maya, can you tell us more? We're curious. How was that experience?
It definitely was an interesting call where I'm a producer, so I'm always there to creatively solve whatever things we need to figure out to make the shoot happen. So one of the creative things that we need to solve for was someone for her to shoot. To have me be the solution is definitely a first time for me, doubling as both talent and producer. But it was really an incredible experience because it allowed me to also like bond more with Rania. Like as Suzanne was saying, she's very protective, and it was really interesting of a dynamic where I felt protective of her as someone on the set that we were running, and then also having that protection come back to me. So it was I mean, honestly, it really felt like a collaborative experience. And it was, I think it speaks towards the entire project overall of like working with these women artists, and we ourselves are women artists. And it felt like a huge collaboration and opportunity to do something that I feel like I would have agreed to even if it wasn't for this shoot. But it was really a great privilege to, I mean, have Rania take my photos as part of work. So it was really an amazing experience for sure.
Very cool. I always love Rania has like these wonderful stories that go along with each of her photographs. And I just think I was really thank you for sharing. I was really taken, especially so the work that Ginny just showed in our collection, Raven, she met this woman sort of in passing in Miami. They were, I think, at brunch at the same time at the same restaurant. And Rania just, I remember she told a story about how she noticed how beautiful her hair was. And I think that's why I was taken by one of the images. It was that you, Suzanne, you're just sort of like straightening or like sort of fixing Rania's hair. And I think, you know, Rania it sounds like she takes such good care of her subjects, in part because she sees herself in them. She talks about how so many of her works are in some ways autobiographical. And she told a story about when she took this photograph of Raven, she was actually suffering from hair loss, and she was really struggling with that, and just was really taken by how beautiful Raven's hair was. So I just thought it was really just beautiful stories that come out of these shoots. And I'm excited to see all of these films, but yeah, I'm particularly excited to see the piece on Rania. And our final, last but not least, Alison Saar, who we've had many works. We have many works by Alison Saar in our collection, mostly prints, and we're really very fortunate this year actually to have acquired a sculpture, our first sculpture by Alison Saar called Scorch Song. That's what you see here, and it will be on view when we reopen. Alison Saar is the daughter of Betty Saar, another famous, well-regarded artist. Alison Saar's works frequently transform found objects. In this case, we see small sort of cast iron skillets and nails, but she also does a variety of printmaking techniques as well to reflect themes of cultural and social identity, mixed race identity, which is her own identity, as well as history and religion. Anais, can you tell us where you filmed Saar and a little bit more about that experience?
Sure. So we filmed with Allison in Laurel Canyon in both her home and her sculpture studio. She has a print studio that's attached to her home. So we filmed scenes in each of those spaces. I didn't get to interview Allison myself. Murat actually conducted that interview. Right? Is that right, Murat? Yeah.
Yes, that's right.
Make sure. And so the radio cut, which is what we call like the skeleton of, you know, just the story, was already done before I shot with Allison. So I had that to go off. But during our scout day, we always do a full day of scouting locations and getting to know our subjects before the actual shoot. I made sure to just like spend some time getting to know her. And I asked her a lot of questions about her routine. I'm really interested in artists' routine and like, what does she drink in the morning? What time does she get up? What time does she like to go into her studio to work? What kind of music is she listening to? How does she move between stations? What kind of gear does she wear? How does it make her feel when she's like holding a chainsaw and hacking away at a gigantic piece of wood? like, what kinds of things is she watching? She listens to a lot of podcasts. And I was like, okay, we can't score this with a podcast. We can't score this with NPR. So what else are you like, how does it make you feel? What is the energy behind the process? And so she was also really generous and, you know, let me into her routine quite a bit. And her work is really political, but it's also really personal. And so I wanted to make sure that we captured the scope of that. And because she works in mixed media, we also needed to make sure that we shot her both at her print station and in her sculpture studio. And yeah, it was a really, really fun shoot. It was really fun also in the post end to find music to kind of highlight both ends of that spectrum, because when she's holding her chainsaw, she is so empowered and she's in a really big space and she has these like big earmuffs and goggles, and it's kind of like a horror film, but you know, it gave us an opportunity to play a lot, and we had a camera moving all around her. It was very dynamic. And then in her print shop, in her print studio, it was actually very intimate. We used a lot of natural light, and I wanted it to, and her house is like a storybook house. It looks like a fairy tale house, and so I wanted to make sure that we captured that really beautifully. And yeah, she was super down to earth, just like such a cool person, amazing artist. Just, I felt really privileged to work with Alison.
Yeah, that image of her with the chainsaw is legendary. That's just going to go down in history for sure. We are almost out of time, but we would be remiss if we didn't thank at least some of the others, a team of many, and this is just a few of them who also assisted on this project. Lots of women on the production side of things, as you can see, which is a whole other discussion that unfortunately we don't have time for. And I also wanted to say, you know, as the project manager on the NMWA end of things, a special shout out to Chelsea for working with me on this project. She's been my ride or die on this, and has been an excellent partner, as all of you have been. So thank you so very much. The films are phenomenal, and I am so excited to share them with our visitors when we reopen.
Yes, thank you all so much for joining us. Just a reminder to folks who are planning to visit, the museum will reopen on October 21st. And I hope that I get to meet some of you in person. And we just really want to thank you all for your time today. Ginny, thank you for going on this journey with me the last couple of years. And thanks to all of our viewers for tuning in today. And for those of you who've joined us for the last couple of years, we've enjoyed gathering with you virtually, and we really look forward to seeing you in person when the museum reopens. I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Thank you all so much. Take care.
Thank you so much.